We are now live.
Okay, thank you, Kirsty. Okay. Good morning to everybody on this board. Councillor Swift has sent his apologies this morning, and has Councillor Scullion chair this meeting, but it's for the board to propose and agree that. Would anybody like to propose chair for this meeting?
I would like to recommend that that's a good idea and to propose that we go ahead with Councillor Scullion.
Okay, can we have a seconder?
I'm happy to second that.
Okay, thank you. Are you happy to chair, Councillor Scullion?
Yes, I wasn't exactly trampled in the rush, was I? But, thank you, no. Thank you for the vote of confidence. And this will be the first Health and Wellbeing Board that I have chaired. So bear with me where need be and be kind. Some of you will know that Councillor Swift has had to have an operation, and I'm pleased to say that all went well and he is recovering well. So I thought I'd pass on that little bit of good news for those of you who know him well. I'm going to be very much guided by officers in terms of keeping on the straight and narrow. I can see everybody on the screen. It'd be helpful if, in terms of wishing to make contributions on the main items, if you could use the hand function, if you can, in relation to wanting to speak. As I say, I can see everybody, so if somebody cannot operate that and starts waving about, then either myself or the officers will pick that up. And you're very welcome, and I will very much keep people to time, let me say, in terms of chairing this meeting. Some of us have other meetings at 12 o'clock, and we will try and be brisk in dispatching the business, but at the same time give it the serious attention that it does require. So thank you to all those who have put together the items for today. Okay, I have got in front of me the agenda, and the first thing is substitutes nominated for this meeting and apologies for absence. Is that Diane or Mike?
Yes, Chair. And we have obviously yourself, you're substituting for Councillor Tim Swift. And the only other one I've been told about is Lisa Williams is substituting for Anna Basford of the CHFT. We do have apologies from Karen Jackson at Locala and Sarah Barker, West Yorkshire Police, as well.
Thank you.
Oh, Mike's got his hand raised.
I believe, Chair, that Councillor Courtney is substituting for Councillor Fenton Glynn.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Sarah, you had a hand up just to say that, presumably. Thank you. Okay. Item 2 is members' interests, and reminding members, council members, but members of the board, to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests that the public should know about in relation to any of the items on this agenda. Are there any declarations of interest that people want to make now, or if not, when items arise later in the meeting? I'm not seeing Andy. Okay, thank you. Item 3 is admission of the public, and it's not recommended that the public be excluded from any of the items on this agenda in the discussion. So if we move on then to item 4, which is the minutes of the Health and Wellbeing Board held on the 16th of June. And I gather this meeting was due to be earlier in August, but I think holidays got in the way. So apologies that it is in fact the 1st of September. It is meant to be the August meeting. So if we look back to those of you who were at the meeting on the 16th of June, can we agree them as a correct record, those of you who were at that meeting? Would somebody like to propose that they are a correct record?
I'll propose them as a correct record, Chair.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder?
Yes, from myself, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that. Okay, and I'll do the signing in due course. Thank you. The next item is question time. We've got a total period of 15 minutes for question time, and questions are usually submitted electronically by lunchtime the day before, and I understand that did indeed happen this time. However, because of leave, democratic support didn't actually get them until this morning. So I understand that officers have had very little time to look in detail at those questions, and it may be that a fuller written answer has to be given in due course. But I wonder, Mike, if you could advise us in terms of the questions that we've got, whether the questioner's here and wishes to ask them directly, and whether officers are in a position to answer.
Chair, Jenny Shepherd is here and wishes to read out her questions. It may be, we've had a brief conversation before the meeting, it may be that officers are able to answer some of the questions, but as you say, it may be that we need to give a full answer in writing later. But Jenny is in the meeting, I believe, Diane.
Yes, I see her now. Thank you for coming, Ms. Shepherd, and thank you for the detailed interest. And as I said before, because of various reasons to do with well-deserved annual leave, you may not get a full answer, but a full written answer will be provided. But let's give it a go. So if you'd like to read your questions, that'd be great.
Thanks, Councillor Scullion and Mike and Democratic Services. Sorry, I've just done something to my screen, which means I've lost. Oh no, I've got it back. Okay, so the written questions I sent in are about, they arise from the refresh of the West Yorkshire Integrated Care Strategy that's on the agenda for this meeting. And it's a set of questions. So the first question is, why does the refresh of the West Yorkshire Integrated Care Strategy make no mention that I can see of the role of GP practices in the strategy? And the reason for asking this question is that given that most patient contacts with the NHS are with general practice, this seems to me to be a massive omission and oversight. Relatedly, how are the interests and needs of general practice to be represented in the Calderdale Place-Based Committee of the Integrated Care Board, which is the committee known as Calderdale Cares Partnership Board? I had two sub-questions on this that I've since found the answers to that I don't need to ask. So I asked, how can patients and public participate in meetings of this committee, and where are notices of this committee published? And I've just found that there's a Calderdale Cares Partnership website that has that information, so I don't need to ask the Health and Wellbeing Board those questions. The third question is, it relates specifically to general practice at the proposed Mixenden Hub. I know that there was a call-in of the Cabinet decision of 8th of August by the Place Scrutiny Committee, and the call-in was on August the 25th. I looked on the council website to see a record of this meeting, and neither the webcast nor the minutes are up yet. So I'd like to ask what the outcome was of the call-in of the Cabinet meeting. And the Cabinet decision that they called in was to approve, firstly, extra prudential borrowing to pay for the construction of the Mixenden Hub. And secondly, the Cabinet's approval of the designation of North Halifax Primary Care Trust as the anchor tenant, which follows the withdrawal of the Caritas GP practice as the intended anchor tenant. It just seems to me that this is part and parcel of the lack of information about how general practice is to participate in the new structures and processes that have been set up by the 2022 Health and Care Act. And I think it's a really important question that the public has answers to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. I'm looking to the officers to begin to, and I suspect it will be a team effort in terms of managing initial answers to those questions in the public domain. And the first one relates to the next item on the agenda, which is the refresh of the West Yorkshire Integrated Care Strategy. And
Yeah, can I? It's Robin here. Sorry, can I just? I'm sorry, I can't find my hand. I needed to ask for hands. Apologies for that. For some reason, it's disappeared. Could just before I think I'll bring. I suggest that I was going to suggest an approach if you bring Ian Holmes in, who I know has got his hand up. I think Ms. Shepherd's questions, in terms of them being related to the integrated care item, I think probably the first one is. So I would suggest that we might have that answer. And then I'm happy to take elements of the questions 2 and 3, although it may be that Dr. Cleesby may also want to respond as a member of the Calderdale Cares Partnership Board, who represents both clinical leadership and primary care on that board. So maybe I just was going to suggest that approach.
that seems eminently sensible. Ian, would you like to come in here, please?
Yes, hi everyone. My name's Ian Holmes. I'm Director of Strategy and Partnerships for the West Yorkshire ICB. Thanks, Councillor Scullion, and thanks, Jenny, for the question. So I guess the slides that we've shared with you this morning are to prompt a conversation about the refresh of the strategy and the future shape of the strategy. Clearly, general practices and GP services are a significant part of that. We've heard from the engagement we've done through Health Watch over the summer that, you know, access to general practice services and access in a way that people find useful to them is something that's really important, and the strategy will reflect that. The strategy will also reflect the response to the Fuller stock take, which was published earlier in the year, which talked about the importance of joining up teams in neighbourhoods and the role of general practice within those neighbourhood teams. So it's an absolutely fair comment, Jenny, and just to reassure you that when we get to the point of developing a strategy document, general practice and the role of GPs as part of an integrated system will be really prominent. In terms of GP involvement in the board of the ICB, we will have a member, we'll have a GP representative on the board of the ICB who will be a voting member of the board, and we're currently in the process of identifying that person. So that's just one part of the GP involvement in decision making, but it's quite important from a West Yorkshire perspective.
Thank you, Ian. That's really helpful. Stephen?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to reiterate again what Ian's just said, and then in terms of Calderdale Place, there is going to be a response for Calderdale and a refresh of that strategy for this part of the ICB for Calderdale, and initial versions of that strategy were shared yesterday amongst members of the place-based team, and there are slides around primary and community care. And one point that was brought up in the meeting that Neil was chairing was the importance of general practice specifically, and access to general medical practice as being a key feature of any refresh of any strategy that takes place in response to the ICB strategy refresh. In Calderdale, we need to make sure we're focusing on our 21 general practices and having good access, telephone, digital, video, face-to-face. So just to reassure Jenny on that particular point, in terms of the Calderdale Cares Partnership Board, it will have 2 clinical members from, two GP representatives, as well as the chair of the clinical forum. So myself at the moment, I'm obviously a serving GP, but it could be that any clinician ends up being chair of the clinical professional forum. But by dint of the fact that I'm currently chair, I will be one of the GPs representing, but there are 2 other places for general practice representatives, and at the moment it's the local medical committee that are taking those 2 places. One, its director of operations, Marcus, and likely also its chair as well. And they will be bringing the voice of representation for general practice into the meetings very clearly, very strongly, I would hope, because it's going to be a priority for the Calderdale Cares Partnership Board to make sure we have high quality and good access to general practice.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephen. Robin, do you want to come in on some of the remainder of the questions?
Yeah, so just I think as Michelle has highlighted, she's had the answer, but I thought it's worth just reiterating to all of the board as well that the patient and public can participate in the meetings of the partnership board that are held in public on alternate months. The next one of those is the 29th of September. The papers are published along with the agenda and minutes on the calderdalecares.co.uk website, which is our new partnership website, having succeeded from the previous CCG. And there'll be, like this, a space for questions from the public. In response to question 3 around the Mixington Hub and general practice, just the short answer is effectively that the decision was released. As you'll know, Chair, you were involved in that meeting. Following the scrutiny meeting, it was a meeting held in public. It was on YouTube and is accessible. The decision was to release that. The focus of that call-in was particularly around the consultation leading up to the decision. I'd say that, as we all know, that development has been a long time in development, and the negotiations around that project have and the shift to the delivery model have predated the formation of the Integrated Care Board, but very much will continue to oversee and have responsibility for that. In relation to 3B, that will depend in terms of the activities that the primary care network will undertake. That will be subject to then the delivery and negotiations between the primary care network, the local authority, and the wider stakeholders in relation to the use of that building. So that's work in progress, and I'm sure at a future point we can report once we are further into the development of that project. But it's, I would just say, huge relief to see that now progressing after many, many years, and that investment in Mixington is going to be very important for that community. Thank you. Oh, you're on mute, Chair, I think.
Yes, just right. Thank you for that, Robin. And I assume that Ms Shepherd will also get a written answer to those questions. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, and thank you for your question. Anything further, Mike, in terms of question time?
No.
Okay.
No,
Thank you. Okay, we move on to item 6 then, which is confirmation of membership of the Health and Wellbeing Board and appointment of the Deputy Chair, including changes due to the new West Yorkshire Integrated Care Board. And it says report from Deputy Leader, but I'm going to pass over to Mike just to indicate where we are and what the options are going forward.
Thank you, Chair. Members who were here at the last meeting will remember that you recommended to Council changes to the terms of reference of the Health and Wellbeing Board and to the membership to reflect the move to the ICB, which came in on the 1st of July. Council agreed both of your recommendations on the membership and the changes to the terms of reference when it met later in July. So as far as the membership goes, that is decided as far as you recommended them. In terms of the Deputy Chair, Councillor Scullion, I had a discussion a few weeks ago with Councillor Swift, and his view as the Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board was that the Deputy Chair should be from an NHS body to demonstrate clearly the partnership arrangements. The Clinical and Professional Forum meets on, I believe, the 8th of September next week to decide its representatives on the Health and Wellbeing Board. So until that meeting has taken place, the NHS contingent isn't complete. So the suggestion is that the board consider deferring the appointment of a deputy chair until to the next meeting, when you can decide from a full complement of NHS members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, there's two things there. One is, do we agree in principle as a board that if you've got a councillor chair, that you should definitely have an NHS deputy chair? Is that a principle that there's general agreement about? I'm seeing no dissension in terms of that. And the second part is, are we happy to defer a decision on the deputy chair until after the meeting that Mike mentioned on the 8th of September? And then after that, at the next meeting, we will move to have a proper complement of appropriate NHS representatives. Happy to defer? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on then to the refresh of the West Yorkshire ICB strategy. And I think, is it Ian, are you leading, or Esther or Debbie?
Esther's going to pick this up. Thanks, Councillor Scully, and she's been leading the work, and I think Debbie and I are going to come in after, if that's okay.
Thank you. Over to you, Esther.
Thank you, Chair. And hi, everyone. My name's Esther Ashman. I'm the Associate Director of Strategy, the West Yorkshire Integrated Care Board team. And I've been leading this piece of work over the last few months. We've got a pack of information that is a slide deck that's in your pack, your agenda and papers pack. And I'm really conscious you've got a busy agenda. So I'm going to take those slides as read if that's okay. But there are just a couple of slides in the deck that I'd really like to focus on as well, so that I can leave some time for discussion at the end. And then I will bring Debbie in, who'll be able to provide sort of a little bit of an illustration about how things are fitting really well across West Yorkshire and with Calderdale itself as well. I also just thought it was helpful to point out, particularly in terms of the public question from Jenny, which was really helpful, and also for board members, is that we've now published the papers for Partnership Board at West Yorkshire next week. And there is a paper within that about the strategy refresh, and that's got far more detail around the information you've got in the slides today, and that might be quite a helpful read. So what I will do is I will make sure that link goes out to you all after the meeting today to have a read through. So as we've moved into our new statutory arrangements as a new IC Integrated Care Board as part of our West Yorkshire Integrated Care Partnership, we've now got a requirement to develop or refresh our 5-year strategy. And as you know, as an integrated care system, we do already have a plan in place, which we published just before the pandemic started. This plan was co-produced across the entirety of the health and care system in West Yorkshire and beyond, into some of our other partners as well. And that responded really well to detailed system engagement that we carried out in response to the NHS long-term plan as well. It's really important to just remember that that plan isn't just NHS focused. It does reflect our wider system we're working in. It encompasses areas of work such as housing and health, trauma-informed services, just to name but a few. And it sets out our 10 big ambitions, which we collectively agreed across our West Yorkshire partnership. And they still stand to this day. And Debbie's going to talk a little bit later about how those ambitions are reflected in the Calderdale plans as well, to make sure that we can ensure the work we do really does collectively make a difference to not just West Yorkshire, but for you guys in particular, in the people of Calderdale. So we have heard loud and clear as part of the process that these 10 big ambitions are still really relevant, and we shouldn't move away from them, because everybody is committed to these as a set of priorities for health and care across the next few years. And the data and evidence that we're getting and the insights is really supporting this at the moment. And we're working on some detailed data around this that we'll be able to share in the coming weeks and months. So given that, this process about refreshing the strategy that we have is about sort of refreshing the one we have in place, but even more so about how we work differently in future to deliver that strategy, make sure we can measure and really feel the impact that it's having on our populations. We've done some of that in the past. We've got it embedded into programs throughout our partnership, but it doesn't feel like we can really truly measure the impact, and that's something we need to get much better at. And also, we're a new organisation, so we need to be able to refine our operating model in order to be able to deliver the strategy. So in terms of the slides you've got in the pack, I just did want to focus on 2 slides that are in there. And if it's okay, Chair, if I could just share that on my screen, which might be a little bit easier for people to see that rather than looking in the pack. So I think someone just needs to allow me to do that, if that's okay.
I think Diane is the host. Diane, are you able to allow access to the screen? And you're on mute.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Diane.
This has been transferred.
Okay, so if someone could just let me know that we can see that slide on the screen. Yeah, yes. I can see Debbie nodding, that's great. So this slide's really important because it just illustrates how our strategy and our plans and delivery really fits together across West Yorkshire. So we have in the bottom left-hand corner, we've got the integrated care strategy, which is what we're here to talk about today, and refreshing that. That's owned by the Integrated Care Partnership. So that's our entire system, and that does include some of those wider determinants of health in there as well. And that's built from the foundation of local health and wellbeing strategies. So the Calderdale health and wellbeing strategy is a key foundation of that West Yorkshire one. So that's part of what we've got already, and we will be refreshing that based on the insight that we have coming out of this process. But then we do need to think about the delivery quite strongly. So at the moment, we've got delivery through the programmes, as I've said, and each of the places are monitoring the delivery of the health and wellbeing strategies. But what we need to get better at is making sure that all those elements really knit together, so that we've got demonstration of delivery for our populations of the entire sort of system. So we have a requirement as an integrated care board in the autumn to produce a joint forward plan for the next 5 years. It'll be reflective of the long-term plan, which is being refreshed as well. And that needs to illustrate delivery of the strategy at West Yorkshire, and also the place strategies, the health and wellbeing strategies. And it needs to tie into operational planning for the NHS, our Better Care Fund, winter planning and financial planning, so that it all aligns together. So we're telling a story through our delivery of how we're delivering that strategy at West Yorkshire. Now, at the moment, what we need to get better at is how we demonstrate that between Place and West Yorkshire as well. So we have our 10 big ambitions that we measure, but what we don't do is we don't ask, how is that being measured at Place? So how is the impact of those 10 big ambitions being measured at Place as well? So we need to get better at nesting that together. So each of the place committees of the ICB will need to have a joint forward plan, which includes delivery of their health and wellbeing strategy and the integrated strategy and all of those other plans as well. So telling the story about how we're going to deliver what we call the must-dos, which is things that you would recognise, such as cancer weights, elective care, recovery, things like that. Also our 10 big ambitions that we've set at West Yorkshire, and for the Place joint forward plan, also there will be other things that for Calderdale it's really important to be able to deliver on, and those will be part of that joint forward plan as well. So we need to get better at being able to measure that impact. And then we also need some really strong strategies that will enable that delivery. So I think I've heard some things around people and workforce today. So having a strong workforce strategy, having a good finance strategy. So starting to really make that shift in how we use our resources. And a digital strategy. And obviously for Calderdale, there'll be some issues around digital inclusion as well that we'll need to make sure that we factor into that. So I just wanted to cover that because I thought that was quite an important one to go through. And then the other slide that I just wanted to touch on, because we've had a lot of insight back, we're starting to think about what that actually means for our strategy. And there's more detail on this that's in the partnership board paper that I'll send the link to. But ultimately, what has come out really strong and clear from partners and from the public is poverty and the cost of living crisis. It's top on there on the bullets, and that's because it's what's coming out most strongly, and I'm sure that won't surprise you. And we need to get better at embedding issues around that and tackling poverty into our 10 big ambitions to drive some action around that. We know we need to strengthen our children, young people and families ambition, so that that's more focused around poverty as well, and access to services, particularly mental health services and crisis services. Then refining the climate change ambition. It's very laudable at the moment. It talks about being a global leader, but is that really sort of reflecting West Yorkshire in our way? And perhaps we need to focus that a little bit better on what will make an impact for our people. And then in building on our improving population health ambition, so that we've got a life course approach. And that actually includes our commitment to good end of life care, which perhaps we've not tackled as yet. And then some broader ambitions around access. And I heard from Jenny's question around GP access, and that absolutely is coming out of all the insight that we've got. But we're also going to be taking on delegation responsibilities for some other services, and we need to think about those things such as dental, optometry, community pharmacy, and some specialised commissioning. So we need to be planning for that. We've also we're a new organisation now. We need to be refining our model as we go and making sure we've got the capacity to do what we're going to say we'll do, and we'll continue to look at that. And then, as I said, having some enabling strategies that really do support the delivery, because it needs to not just be something that sits on a shelf. It needs to be something that the people of Calderdale will really feel. That's really important to us. So I'll just pause for a second. And Debbie, I don't know whether you want to talk a little bit about how this fits with Calderdale.
Yes, that's great, if that's okay, Councillor Scullion. So, hi everybody. I think I know most of you, but I'm Debbie Graham. So I'm Director of Improvement for the Calderdale Cares Partnership Board. And just in terms of the diagram that Esther showed, kind of that nesting one about how the processes will work. So we took a proposal into development last week at Calderdale Cares Partnership Board development session for the development of that forward plan for Calderdale, for our Calderdale's Care Partnership. That will be, again, a broad spectrum plan following the same timelines as the West Yorkshire one. So we have agreement in principle, which will be going to the formal meeting of the board towards the end of September. So I think we're on that journey now to play the part we need to play. The bottom line for us is this is all embedded in 3 of our key strategic intents, and there is in the pack a logic model which I don't suggest you might want to peruse at your leisure. It is quite it's quite a busy diagram, but the aim of it really is to look at the 10 ambitions across West Yorkshire that we're all signed up to, and think about how that fits with both how we want to deliver strategic intent in Calderdale and what we actually want to do. So that just looks at those 10 ambitions and considers how they will be delivered and what our part is, what our response is in Calderdale. Given that the strategic direction for West Yorkshire is driven by the 5 wellbeing strategies, it's not surprising that there is a lot of alignment. So I think from that diagram, hopefully, so the first slide really looks at the more health and care related aspects of the 10, and that relates really well to delivery of our wellbeing strategy and the life course approach that Debs has developed with her teams. And I think so we can see the alignment there. The second slide just looks more at the non-health related, so the more health determinants. And I think there's a good fit with the work that we've done in Calderdale on our inclusive economy strategy, and indeed the work that's been done on the climate change action plan. So I think for Calderdale, the aim of those 2 diagrams is really just to show that there is alignment between the 2. Obviously for us, we're driven by those 3 strategic directions, but I feel there's plenty of alignment in those, and that was the point of those extra 2 diagrams at the end. So I'll stop there and hand back to Councillor Scullion.
Thank you, Debbie. Just to say that Debbie has been part of our strategy refresh process as well. We've got a group that represents the entirety of our partnership that are working on this, and Debbie has been working across Calderdale with us on this strategy refresh, which has been fantastic. Ian, I don't know whether there was anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, I mean, thanks Esther, and thanks Debbie. That was really clear. I guess we're just really interested in your views, thoughts, ideas. You know, we've got the 10 ambitions. We've heard that they're broadly in the right place. We know we need to do more around access to services as part of the strategy, including general practice services, including planned care. We know we need to be a lot stronger on poverty and the health and care response to the cost of living crisis that's already with us, and it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And we know there's probably more work we need to do around children and families to strengthen that as well. Does that feel broadly in the right place? Is there anything obvious we're missing? Just really interested in views and ideas, really. Thank you, Councillor Scullion.
Thank you, Ian. And I'm going to take Ashley first, and then I'm going to take advantage of my position as a chair and as a newbie to ask a couple of questions. Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Esther and colleagues. Very clear, detailed report. You referenced particularly the 10 big ambitions, which I think is obviously a major part of the report. And I was particularly pleased to see that it sort of panders to one of my hobby horses with having some significant targets and dates by which you will achieve those things. I think too often these sorts of reports can say very good sounding things, but not actually set targets and make things happen. So it's really good to see that appearing. If we just move on to, I think it's page 19, which is the Integrated Care Strategy Guidance, there seems to be a little bit of a fallback there where we're talking about key areas for considering when producing the strategy, things like personalised care, addressing disparities in health and all that sort of thing. There is nothing in there, unless I've missed it somewhere else, in terms of specific values and dates by which these things and how much they will improve and so on. So I think that area, if I've missed it, my apologies. If not, I think we need something in those particular areas, which because it's an important aspect of it. And the third comment, which sticks out to me, is in terms of page 27. We're talking about life expectancies and the fact that they are worst in our places. It's reduced expectancy of women 1.9 years, men 2.4. Do we know why this is, and what are we doing about it as a result of that? It's something which comes up quite regularly. And being an older person as well, I'm particularly sensitive about these things. So that covers me for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, that was quite a few questions actually. Before I come to,
sorry, I've been reading it through.
Who wants to pick up? Esther?
I mean, I can pick up maybe this.
Yeah.
So I think the first one was a bit of positive feedback. So thank you very much, Councillor Evans. I think the second one, in terms of the list coming out of the national guidance on integrated care systems, so that including personalisation and those sort of things. Yeah, I mean, the absolute intent wherever we can is to be clear and specific in terms of the level of measurable improvement that we want to include. We're doing a lot of work in Calderdale across West Yorkshire on the personalisation agenda, and there are actually sort of specific sort of milestones and measures there around, you know, personal budget and things like that we can include. So I think that's a really good point. In terms of the life expectancy gaps in Calderdale, I don't know, Debs, whether that's your area of expertise rather than mine potentially.
Debs, do you want to pick that up?
I mean, yeah, the you know, the gap in life expectancy, the reason for that is largely to do with those core determinants of health, or the sort of living conditions and the sort of social, economic and environmental conditions are really the reason why we see the gap in life expectancy. There are really important things that our NHS partners can do, though, to identify those people at high risk of having long-term conditions that are exacerbated because of fuel poverty and because of you know, some challenges in during the pandemic in the uptake of what we'd consider preventative healthcare services like health checks and like screening, etc. It is something that we have had conversation probably in the previous municipal year here about the use of the health inequalities money that is coming down to Calderdale. To focus that really on that tackling some of the inequalities in health, particularly in access to preventative healthcare, thinking about some of the groups in our communities that are the most vulnerable to things like substance misuse, complex and multiple disadvantage, and also I'm trying to remember a list in my head, and also we are an outlier as people know in relation to suicide, which is also one of the big contributors to our inequality, life expectancy inequality gap. So again, there's a lot of work going on around suicide prevention, but also about how we follow up people with suicidal ideation, particularly those that are less likely to engage with some of the follow-up who tend to be from our more disadvantaged areas. So we've got a plan to use that inequalities money. Debbie and I are working really closely on how we do that work. And I think finally what I would say is it's really positive and really helpful to see in the strategy that contribution in the longer term to some of those economic determinants and environmental determinants of health through the work that the ICB is doing on climate change and on supporting the economy as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Over to you, Sarah. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah, first, that was an excellent presentation, really interesting, really detailed. I've got two questions really. I think the first bit is a really important point was made about getting better at understanding the impact that the strategy is having on the ground for people, and that's fantastic. So I just want to know what are we going to do in order to get that intelligence? How are we going to intend to sort of to learn what that impact is, and is there anything that we can do to help to do that? So around getting that information. And then the second part is around the voluntary community sector in delivering the 10 ambitions. So presumably, the voluntary and community sector will be quite important in terms of delivering the ambitions and the priority outcomes. But in inflation and the cost of living crisis might impact that quite a lot. So are we going to be able to support the sector, or is the board going to be able to support that sector at all? Those are my two questions.
Thank you. Esther, do you want to pick up those ones?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just starting with the latter question on the voluntary and community sector, and you're absolutely right. It's a really important part of the delivery of our strategy. They are part of our infrastructure. They are part of our partnership, and a very important part of our partnership. As part of, I think I lightly touched on the way that we're doing the refreshes, that we've got a large group of people working with us, and we're going out to far more groups and individuals and sort of formal governance than we would have ever done on this kind of engagement in terms of the refresh. And I've personally been with Jo Baker, who leads on the voluntary and community sector work across West Yorkshire, to quite a number of the groups, and they've been incredibly articulate about the challenges that are facing them. And as a result of that engagement, as you'll see from the previous slides about how we move into the enabling strategies, the bit about how important that step is the VCS have come together to set up a set of principles for commissioning and finance that they are feeding into the finance strategy, putting forward proposals as to how they think we should work in future in order to be able to support them as a sustainable sector. So that is absolutely on the agenda as part of this work, and they've done a great job in that. And Jonathan Webb, the Director of Finance, is taking that engagement through into the finance strategy. So hopefully that will give you some assurance on that. In terms of better understanding the impact, so the important step from the strategy to the joint forward plan is understanding if what our strategy is, what are the metrics. It might be that we need to refine them a little bit based on how we refine the ambitions, and understanding how we're going to have some action around those is an important step, and that will go into the joint forward plan. We will then have to refresh that every year. And as part of that refresh, we'll be using our involvement framework to be able to make sure that we can go out to our populations and find out how things are feeling to them, as well as using the data. The data only tells one part of the story. The people on the ground and how they're feeling tells the really important part of the story. So that will be built into the process as we go on annually through the life cycle of this strategy. But absolutely, councillors can really help with that. And I know Karen Coleman and the team work really closely with local authorities, because you have some really valuable on the ground insight that we can take on board.
Indeed. Thank you, Esther. Sue, something from the housing perspective?
Thank you. That was a nice lead in there, Councillor Scullin. Yes, I'm Sue Lewis from Together Housing, and I'm a bit on the outside here, so forgive me if I've completely missed this, but I found it really helpful this morning, the discussion. I suppose my question is a bit of an obvious one, in that as a housing professional, when I read the latest document, I can't see it quite that explicitly mention of housing. I'm wondering if we should be picking that up as a key determinant as part of the refresh, and particularly unwelcomed the white paper, which really for the first time put housing at the forefront, and the quote about no decision about care should be made without a decision about housing. And you don't need me to say appropriate and affordable housing is absolutely key to good health and well-being, and even more so with the cost of living crisis and utilities and the inability of people to heat. So as I say, it's pretty basic comment, but I suppose my question is, should housing be more prominent within we would like to see a sort of health, social care and housing strategy? And apologies, as I said at the beginning, if I've missed that.
Who wants to pick that one up? Esther again?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. That is a really, really valuable comment. And we have Sarah Roxby, who is leading the Housing for Health partnership across West Yorkshire. Myself and one of my colleagues who's working with me on this, Shane Hayward-Giles, went along to the Housing for Health partnership to talk to them about the strategy. And we've got another session coming up, a full sort of couple of hours session with the group to be able to talk about how we actually do make sure this strategy has got housing embedded throughout it. So just to assure you that work is underway. It might not be coming out explicitly in the slides, but it absolutely is a huge part of our strategy.
Thank you. Ian, do you want to comment on that one?
It is really helpful, Sue. I guess just to add to what Esther said, we have got a process around that, but if you've got specific thoughts and ideas and suggestions, outside of that, we'd love to hear them.
Yes. I'm going to, thank you, Ian. I'm going to take Daryl now, and then Ashley, is that a legacy hand by any chance? No, you did have 3 questions.
Sorry, it's another question I've thought of.
Right, okay, I'm going to take Daryl, Stephen, Ashley. I'm going to take the 3 of you, and then I'm going to ask the officers who are presenting this item to respond. So Daryl first.
So just a quick update around the suicide prevention part of the ambition. I'm Daryl Thompson, I'm Chief Nurse at South West Yorkshire, but I'm also one of the co-SROs for suicide prevention for West Yorkshire. So it's just to flag for board that Calderdale Place is well represented at the West Yorkshire Suicide Prevention Oversight Group. And as part of that, and picking up on Deb's comments around picking up people who might be at risk of suicide who don't come under mental health services, we're working in partnership with West Yorkshire Police as part of a real-time surveillance system to identify people who've made attempts on their life but then don't follow through into services. So appropriate follow-up and signposting can be targeted at them.
Thank you. That's very good to know. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a suggestion really for the Health and Wellbeing Board. So we have this West Yorkshire refresh going on. We're going to write a Calderdale version of that for place, and that will be happening in 5 places across West Yorkshire. Then in Calderdale, we've got our inclusive economy strategy, and we've got health and wellbeing strategy. So just thinking about how all this relates to it, how they all relate to each other, and how they then are going to impact on our population in Calderdale. I wonder whether, and I agree with the strategy, I agree with the refresh, and I think the Health and Wellbeing Board should support it. But I wonder whether an informal session of the Health and Wellbeing Board just to look at all these and how they triangulate and work together and support each other, rather than trying to memorize different strategies, and sometimes you get confused and you get lost in the detail. So I don't know whether that would be something that would be useful for the Health and Wellbeing Board, just to try and get a picture of what all this is and how it's impacting on our population.
Thank you. It's a very interesting idea, actually, and I think it's probably one that I will task the officers with going away and thinking about and taking further soundings on that. Ashley, I'm going to bring you back in. You're only allowed 1 question this time.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not certain it's part of this, but dentistry came to mind, how it fits in here. It's obviously a high profile in the media at the moment. There are problems in terms of availability of the service, particularly for those who aren't able to pay for it. And it came up, for example, I was in corporate parenting yesterday, and it was a major issue raised there. I've not seen it as part of this element. Should it be? Is it? Or will it come up somewhere else? Last question. Thank you.
Thank you. And indeed, you've stolen my thunder, because I was going to make exactly that point, really, in terms of one of the things that is important, our place in Calderdale, and has been thoroughly looked at in scrutiny. Like Marilyn Greenwood, for example, Councillor Greenwood, was one of the things she felt very passionately about. And I see that it's mentioned in the papers as one of the insight bits, but it is actually big for us locally in terms of our own health and wellbeing strategy. And so I was wondering a bit like Ashley in terms of where that sits, where the emphasis is for Calderdale, and also is it very much part of the inequalities? Because what has starkly emerged from the pandemic is the inequality of access to dentistry and oral health care. So Ian and Esther, you've both got your hands up. Can you come back on these issues?
Yeah, well, should I go first, Esther, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. So it's a really good point. I think it is a significant inequalities issue. It also links to the ambitions that we started to describe around children and young people. We know it's a real issue for children, particularly from certain communities. Where we are with dental is that it's currently commissioned by NHS England, but the plan is that it will move to commissioning by the Integrated Care Board from next April, so April 2023. So we're doing a lot of work now with the NHS England team to fully understand that service, the commissioning of that service, the inequalities issues, the workforce issues, the challenges that you're describing, so that we are able to take on that service and hopefully, work towards improvements from next April. In terms of the timescales, you're quite right. The strategy will be a 5-year strategy from next April. So we're working with NHS England to ensure that the ambitions around dental services are properly reflected, because we will be taking those on from next April, as I've said. So the short answer is yes. It's slightly different from a lot of other areas, given the nature of the commissioning and the delegation coming down next April.
Okay, thank you. Esther, final words?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things is that Catherine Giles, who is leading on the sort of delegation of some of our primary medical services, including dental, and I are working closely on that together to really do make sure we do make those links. And also, just you mentioned the corporate parenting and the fact that it came up in there. We have a meeting coming up with a health equity fellow who also is leading the children's oral health group across West Yorkshire as well, and to have a conversation about the strategy and make sure that we're really picking up that child oral health as well. So it's definitely on the radar, but all comments and prompts and challenges around that are just really helpful to support us with that.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to the three of you for that presentation. And there was a lot there. I think I gathered from what Ian said, of course, contact us with further ideas, detailed comments. So please take up that offer. Before I go on to the next item, which is Ageing Well at 8, I had been reminded by the officers that there was still a little bit of business to do under item 6. Robin, would you like to just tidy up that final bit of business?
Yeah, just to tidy up really, just to formally note the fact this is the first meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Board since the Integrated Care Board became statutory on the 1st of July, so that the representatives of the board are reflected in the partnership. It's the same individuals, myself as place lead for the Calderdale Cares Partnership, for Neil Smurthwaite is the Chief Operating Officer, and Stephen is in his new role on the membership as the chair of the Clinical and Professional Forum. I thought we should just note that and note it in the minutes. So just mind me to advise you of that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. That will be recorded in the minutes. If we could move on then, folks, to Ageing Well. And Ken, I think from Foreign Parts, if the technology works, you're going to take us through this item.
Yeah, good morning, Councillor Scully, and good morning, Board. Hope you can hear me. I have to give an apology. I've got a bit of a technical problem this morning in that my camera is not working, but the majority of the presentation will be an on-screen slide presentation, so you wouldn't have seen me in any case. We're going to do the presentation between myself and Richard Porter, and really it's an update on Ageing Well. So I'll try and share my screen initially and see if we can see that. Is that showing?
Not yet.
Okay.
I wonder if the host, something has happened.
Yeah, that is now showing.
Right, thank you. We've got it.
Yeah, great. I'll expand that so you can see that as large as it will be. Yeah, thanks very much, Chair and all. So what I'm going to do today, we've got a brief presentation just to update you on the progress on Ageing Well. Obviously, this is a fundamental part of the health and wellbeing strategy, And I'm just going to run through some of the work that we've done. Last updated Health and Wellbeing Board on this in March. So since October, just a brief recap. Healthy ageing, ageing well, and our age-friendly Calderdale ambitions kind of run hand in hand. So as we know, we've got those ambitions agreed by Council, CCG, Health and Wellbeing Board, 3CPB, Health and Care Leaders, and so on. We know, obviously, in the context of the last discussion, that things have moved on quite significantly from that. We've now got the statutory body across West Yorkshire. And obviously, one of the things that we'll need to do is make sure it's embedded within that. We had the early success of having age-friendly ambitions embedded in the Calderdale housing strategy. We're now a member of the UK Network for Age-Friendly Communities, and we've established the Ageing Well Alliance, which is now meeting regularly. In December and November, we had the appreciative inquiry, and I'll come on to that briefly. Obviously, we had the Health and Wellbeing Strategy agreed in December. So since then, since I last updated Health and Wellbeing Board, we've now made some progress on developing the Ageing Well plan. So this started with the Ageing Well workshop at the Shea Stadium in April. And then we had a number of online workshops, 5 online workshops in July, to really look at the 5 key priority areas, which are about accessibility, things to do, safety and belonging, getting about, and age-friendly housing. And I'll go into a little more detail on those as we progress through the presentation. And just to say, the Ageing Well Board meets next Tuesday, so we'll be looking at the draft Ageing Well plan and the workshop outcomes in some greater detail to develop the plan. And just a brief reminder then on the World Health Organization Age-Friendly Communities, age-friendly standards across 8 domains. And I think the thing for me that we've probably said before, and it's really interesting, is that these are all about the wider determinants of health, about the places we live in, the transport we have, the houses that we live in, social partnerships and links, social inclusion, civic participation, how we communicate with our communities and the information that we give to them and receive from them. And interestingly, health is the final word on this screen. So that's the way that that links in. So just a little about the Ageing Well Alliance then. That's now got a programme of bi-monthly meetings. It's co-chaired by the Director of Adult Services and Wellbeing, and will continue to be so when our new Director of Adult Services and Wellbeing comes into post in October, and also by the Chief Executive of Age UK, Calderdale and Kurt Lee. So that's a really important feature of the board, is that it's co-chaired by Council and by community and voluntary sector. So at one of its first meetings, the Ageing Well Board adopted the Ageing Well programme mandate, with a big focus then on the Health and Wellbeing Board's strategic outcome for our older people, that older people have strong social networks and live in vibrant communities. So this has been driving all the work that we've done. And particularly when we come to the questions and comments following the presentation, I think I'd like some comment back on how we're doing in terms of the Ageing Well plan, in terms of the ways of working there. So in terms of joining up services to change lives for the better, the focus on prevention, addressing health inequalities, and making sure that we have empowered and resilient communities. So just a very, very brief recap of the work that was done in the appreciative inquiry. We presented this in some detail back in March, and the report was circulated. But I think it's worth just having a brief recap about this, the way that it was done. So it is a fundamental part of Ageing Well that we are developing strategies to engage and involve older people and communities in all that we do. And I'll come on to the next phase of the work, which is looking to strengthen that and embed it in the ways of working that we have in Calderdale with our partners across all sectors, and particularly with our community and voluntary sector partners, building on all the wonderful things that have been achieved during COVID, and the way that little things have popped up to support communities, and the structured things that have been done also to support communities. So we gathered some insights about what would make Calderdale a really good place to age in. And I know that some of this is probably going over old ground, and there's plenty of work being done on this in the past. But this piece of work particularly identified 5 key areas. And these are really interesting to me because they look at physical accessibility as its core, places to socialise, activities to get involved in, a feeling of safety and belonging, reliable and well-connected public transport and ways of getting about, and age-friendly housing. So these were the 5 priorities from our initial soundings from our public. So just skip through these very, very briefly. I'll circulate the presentation. So I won't go through these in detail now, but accessibility is about accessibility to places, to services, and also digital accessibility, which is crucially important in the way that technology is moving so rapidly. Things to do is about spaces for older people, learning and creative activities, and about physical activity. Safety and belonging is about the physical nature of the place, places feeling safe, the service provision that we have, and people feeling more connected. So that ties directly into our high-level outcome that older people are more connected. And then well-connected public transport, so reliable bus services, rethinking how public transport connects and disconnects communities, and then thinking about accessibility to transport venues as well. And then finally, age-friendly housing. This has come up so often, and it's a really important part of it, ensuring that our housing is age-friendly for the future. This piece of work also came up with some pointers for the way that we work, about thinking through an age-friendly lens. And I think having age-friendly embedded into our housing strategy is a starting point. So we need age-friendly embedded in our strategies at high level and in our practices in terms of the way that we work with people. So they came up with ideas about prototyping, so doing some small things that would make a difference very, very quickly. Understanding the diversity of our population. Yeah, we're taking the World Health Organization definition, which is 50 plus. So there's a population of 75,000 people aged 50 plus, 40,000 people aged 65 plus, and then developing feedback loops. Okay, I'll skip on from that. And just some principles as to the way we develop our Ageing Well plan, to make sure it includes the views, concerns and values of older people and communities, that it's based on the best international and national good practice evidence, and it's also based on the expertise of professionals and practitioners. So that is all of us in this room and others who came along to the workshops. You've got years of experience of working with older people and developing services and approaches to improving their health and well-being. So at this point, I'm going to hand over briefly to Richard. We held 5 workshops in July to look at each of those 5 priorities and came up with some draft actions for the coming year. And I think the emphasis within that was, we don't want to try and do it all for the Ageing Well board, but we want to identify some things that we can focus on for the first year to make a difference. So I'll hand over briefly to Richard, who's going to go through the 5 action plan. Richard.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Karen, and good morning, board. So I will go briefly through the 5 actions that we're looking for. So the workshops that we had were really fantastic. Great representation from individuals who are on the ground, providing support and care, and really individuals at the top who are really leading strategy and development. So really great sessions that we had. The great thing about the sessions was also they were all interconnected. So although we had a specific workshop on each of the 5 aims, it was always suggested there was something else that connected with another action, so that there was a lot of sort of tethers that put the actions together. But briefly, what we thought was we asked the group, what are the things we can identify building on from the workshop at the Shea Stadium, and we had a really deep discussion for each of the actions, and we came up with 3 clear, as we can see, actions in bold for each of the themes, and each of those had some short, some medium and long term actions that would be taken within a 12-month period, owned by the Ageing Well board. and accessibility was really one. Green and blue infrastructure came up, and how there were great space to go, but we will need to actually improve in certain aspects of increasing accessibility, encouraging physical activity and moving around. Towns and the places are really important. That's an area that we want to work on, and it's discussed sort of throughout this board. Digital accessibility and being aware of the things around us is going to be an important aspect of the theme of accessibility, and each of these key themes have some short, medium and long-term goals. Things to do is a second. We have again 3 actions: raising awareness, and we also want to ensure that the activity in Calderdale is inclusive. It's not specifically just for older people in Calderdale, but it's where people are integrated. Intergenerational activity comes together. So it's not solely exclusive for older people, but how older people can integrate within the current activities that are happening in Calderdale. And again, a further emphasis on making sure that older adults are healthy, nutrition plays a role, and being connected in those communities and reducing isolation. Safety and belonging is a third. And again, in terms of safety and belonging, what really came out was under how can places and spaces be a dementia and age-friendly place. There's some good work that's happening, great work that's happening in Calderdale on those parts, and how can we enhance that and make sure that is moved across Calderdale. Personal safety, homes came up, communities, as we would expect, and also we want to draw on the strengths of community and neighbours and make a connection and belonging. That if someone is still residing in their own home and having difficulty to get out, that they are connected to the communities. And fourth, getting about. We can see transport is really important, and there was some short, medium and long term information that came up there. We want to make sure that we can work with transport to make sure that they have an age-friendly approach, and confidence and self-esteem was an extremely important concept. How can we get people to feel confident and build up their self-esteem, interrelated with services, people, loved ones, to get out and about in their communities and being connected with things to do and get access to other services. And finally, age-friendly housing, maybe arguably one of the greater depth conversations that we had, but also we had a reflection that the current stock that we have in Calderdale is an important starting point, and there's things that we can do here, and we can in turn make sure that future we can increase of what does age-friendly homes look like right now, what do age-friendly homes look like for the future, and what options do people have. What options do people have currently now and going forwards to adapt and improve their homes and future prospects as well? And we want to make sure independence is really a really important element of that. How can people continue to do all the other things we talked about, things to do, getting about, access to services, and independence or being interdependent is really important. So those are the 5 areas what potentially the Aging Well Board could adopt and work towards over a 12-month period, supported greatly with the Aging Well Working Group and our other partners across Calderdale and the West Yorkshire patch. So Ken, we want to move on.
Great. Thanks very much for that, Richard, just whipping through those. And I think the final thing that Councillor Scullion and the board is just to say that we're developing sustainable ways to engage and involve older people in all of our future plans. And I think this is such an important part of what we're doing. And I won't go through all of this, but our current structure is a kind of a pyramid structure with the Health and Wellbeing Board at the top of that governance. But I think one of the things that we want to do with older people and communities is to try and work across those layers to increase the extent to which older people and communities have influence on the plans that we're making, on the ways that we work, and involvement in the things that we're doing. So that's a programme of work that's taking us through to next February to embed some of that across our community and voluntary sector and across our partners. And I think for now, I'll leave it there, Councillor Scullion, from that update, and pass back to yourself for the discussion.
Thank you. I'll open up for the discussion in a minute. If you could take the slides down, Ken, that would be great, so I can see people. I declare an interest as somebody who's trying to age well, like perhaps one or two other people on this call. Questions, comments on this? Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. I concur with the ageing well bit and working on it myself. There's obviously some really good stuff happening here, and thank you very much for that presentation. It's good to see it, the depth to which you're working on this and the cross organisations which are being involved in this. And one of the things which really struck me about that was a reference at some point by one of the presenters about the importance of integrated activity between not just playing bingo or whatever for the elderly or doing exercises, but the importance of involving young and younger people with the elderly. I think that has mutual benefits. I think too much we tend to end up in these silos of older people, middle-aged working people and young people and so on. And the combination, going back to the old days when you had integrated families, people were used to putting up with elderly, infirm, gaga people like myself, who they understand that that's a part of life, and I think it's really important that we involve other people in all of those things. So it's good to see all these things happening. I think one of the important areas, again, which was alluded to particularly, is the comms side, the communication of this. It's great to see all these people and different organisations being involved. It's about also one of the things I find in my ward is that elderly people don't necessarily know about all these wonderful things which are going on. And I think we perhaps need to put more effort into regularly reminding drip people about what is available and how they access those things. I think that's really, really important. One of the axioms I've always applied in my own sort of day job type business is that you never actually communicate as well as you think you do. You may well say, well, we've told people, we've said this and said, you may well, but it's about communication, is about people hearing it and responding. So I think we really need to keep working about that one. And in that particular context, the digital media issue in terms of older people being less accessible to it, I think there was some reference to it late on in the presentation. But for example, in my own ward at the Pelham Hub, as it used to be, we used to have a regular group for older people working on computers and teaching them how to use them and so on. It's those aspects of it as well which are really important. Overall, great report. Thank you very much, and more power to your elbow.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm going to take a few people in turn and then come back to Ken and Richard. Sean next, then Sue, then Debs.
Thank you, Councillor Scullion. I'm representing what would have been Ian, who's now retired, but I'm the interim director before Kath comes along in October. I just wanted to illustrate, and particularly and it's touching on what's just been outlined really, just to illustrate some of the ways that we're trying to practically implement what the strategy is saying. So my role in adult social care is to make sure that from a first contact perspective, we are talking to people from 50 onwards, but all adults really, but particularly as far as this area is concerned, to make sure that we're understanding their situation. So we often talk about strength-based conversations, and that can mean anything and a lot of things to different people, but essentially our call advisors and our social workers and our assessors, be that in Gateway to Care or in the long-term teams, the localities, are trying now to ask the questions about a person's, obviously their current situation, what needs they might have, but also their strength-based questions around what is it that you feel you can do for yourself? Is it about isolation? Are there things that we could support or bring together as far as other groups that may alleviate your isolation? We have a big disability facilities grant where we can use some of that money preventatively to make sure that if people have some early physical signs of disability or long-term conditions, they can maintain their independence and accessibility in the community as well as at home for as long as possible before, you know, their health naturally deteriorates, and we can support in different ways as time goes on. And so there are, for instance, in terms of digital access, we're supporting people to be more digital savvy and directing them to courses so that, as was said, really, they can kind of access that, so that there is lots of information now on our new or soon to be launched Live Well Calderdale site about what's happening in a person's locality that they can easily, essentially kind of Google and find out more about, rather than have to wait to speak to a person. And there are lots of initiatives that we're working on as far as this programme, particularly now conversations with parish councillors and so on, to make sure that we are working and understanding what the communities are saying to us, as well as our workers going out to proactively have these conversations.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to take Sue next and then Debs.
Thank you, and well done, Richard and Ken, for pulling all that together. Just a quick comment and a quick question. I'm just wondering, and we can take it back to the Ageing Alliance Board, but whether we should be calling age-friendly homes rather than housing, when I reflect on that. And the other bit is just, it's a question, and it was mentioned at the beginning when we were talking about the wider strategy, is the cost of living crisis is here. Its impact on people's homes and ability to heat homes is, you know, goes without saying, absolutely massively concerning. And I'm just wondering, and I don't want to disrupt what's a great action plan, but whether a short-term action, we need to review and reflect that, because certainly older people as well as young people are going to be, the health impacts are going to be huge, and being flexible in our prioritisation. So I think maybe one going back to the Ageing Well Board, but just to flag it up on reflection.
Thank you very much. Debs, over to you, and then I will go back to Ken and Richard for summing up.
Thank you, Councillor Scullion. It was just a question, I guess, about the action plan and about the work that the partnership's doing, and how is the partnership ensuring that the action plan and, well, that Calderdale itself and the action plan mean that Calderdale will be age friendly for Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities. It was we did some really important work, I think, as a board, didn't we, a year ago to 6 months ago, around the tackling inequalities and particularly addressing some of those structural root causes of racial inequalities that COVID was able to exploit. And I think it's going to be really important that whenever we get these deep dive sessions on the 4 outcomes that we're working on, that we ask ourselves and each other about the racial inequalities in achieving that outcome, and the specific action that's going to be taken to address those inequalities.
Thank you. Ken, Richard, do you want to come back and sum up and respond?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, and thanks very much for that discussion and the questions that arose from it. There's some really good points there, and I'll try and respond to each one. And I think just going back to Sue's point in terms of the cost of living crisis, that issue about fuel poverty and the impending crisis in terms of fuel poverty, and the significant number of houses that will be pulled into even the official definition of fuel poverty. We know that's going to be significant, and there was a big discussion about that, and that one of the things that we can do very early on, which will make a difference in terms of that, is making sure that people's homes are energy efficient. We have programs. So I've been working with Richard Armitage in our housing team, who's got programs looking at fuel poverty and thinking about drafts and making people's homes more fuel efficient. So I think that is a high priority, and I think that's something that we can discuss at the Ageing Well Board on Tuesday, and make sure that that's reflected adequately in our plans for the future. And I think the other significant point from Debs is in relation to diversity. Yeah, if we're thinking about a population of 75,000 people aged 50 plus, 40,000 people aged 65 plus. There's a huge diversity within that. And there's two things for me really about that diversity. One is that there's a huge diversity in terms of skills, talent, creativity, expertise and contribution to our society that's really, really important. But fundamentally, we've also written into our plans to look at the implications for, as a minimum, the protected groups within our population of that age. So specifically looking at our Black and minority ethnic groups, particularly looking at the gender gaps that there are, and also the differences that there are in terms of experiences for people who come into LGBT groups as well. So as a minimum, we'll be looking at those things, but also the other protected groups as well. And I think we'll need to reflect that a little bit more closely. We do have a section in our plan at the moment on diversity and recognising diversity. We recognise it's a really important part. I think based on what Debs has said, yeah, we'll need to make sure it's written into the action plans a little bit more clearly. So a really good point there. So I think that's all the response from myself, Chair, unless I missed a very, very important question. I'll pass back to yourself.
No, that's a very good summary. And the recommendation asks us to note that. And we did want to see this as one of the 4 priorities, really, and have that deeper dive. And I think we've done that. More power to your elbow, really, and you've noted the points that people have made. So thank you very much for that. Folks, we've got one more substantive item, the Calderdale Carers strategy, and then just 3 information items. So if we could move on then, is it Graham who's going to lead on the Carer strategy, or Kate? Kate?
Yes, I'm here, but Rona will start and then I'll
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks for that. So for those that don't know me, I'm Rona Radley and I'm the Deputy Director for Improvement at Calderdale Cares Partnership. And I've been overseeing this work around the Calderdale Carers strategy. With me is Kate Bonzi. Kate Bonzi, he has been brought in to work with us as an integrated post across health and social care to work on the development of the Calderdale Carers strategy. So you've received a copy of the strategy with the proposed action plan, and we're bringing that today for Health and Wellbeing Board to sign that off. I'm going to hand over to Kate. Kate's going to just take you through a few presentation slides just to pull out the key points of how we've developed this and the approach that's been taken across the system to get to where we are.
Thank you, Rona. Thank you all. I'm going to try and share my screen and hopefully that works. And oh, there we go. I'm going to try and make this.
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Yes. So yes, thank you all. So my name is Kate Bonzi. I'm a project manager working across both health and care. We're here today to just ask the Health and Wellbeing Board to be cited on the approach that was taken to develop the strategy that you've all seen, to note and have this discussion about the development and some of the outputs that have come from it, and hopefully to get it signed off, the strategy and the accompanying action plan as well, so that we can get this published. I'm just going to talk through a timeline about the strategy and how it was developed. So the strategy was being drafted from about 2019 by officers in the council. Obviously that COVID came in and there was a pause to that. So I was brought in, as Rona said, in March to help move this forward and kind of be a dedicated resource to kind of get more push to move things faster. So I came in March and I started doing that. When I joined, I engaged with a wide range of key stakeholders just to understand the context of the carers services that we have in Calderdale currently, some of the programs of work that was already in place, regionally especially, and then the national context coming in from the NHS long-term plan and some of the carer national context. We also had a workshop in June and to help to co-produce the vision and objectives. And that was a very key workshop. I'll talk a little bit more about that as I go on. And the strategy was delivered in August, and we're here to present it to hopefully get it signed off. These are some of the themes that informed the development. So what we were looking at in terms of what we should focus on in drafting the strategy. I'm going to read through some of them. So better identification of carers, definitely those from a marginalized or ethnic minority groups. That was something that stood out to us. Also, better ways of involving the different cohorts of carers. So making sure that the different voices of carers were part of this. And this was kind of taken on at the workshop where we had breakout sessions, and those breakout rooms, there were 6 rooms, and they were focused on these cohorts. So each room had one for young carers, one for adult carers, etc. So that was really key because we were able to get focused feedback on those cohorts to try and support them going forward. There was some communication or some discussion about making sure that we get feedback from carers who are already using the current services that we have in place. And then the carer voice came from engagement that had been done before. And the voice, what we are hearing is that, isolation, especially after COVID, caring responsibilities or caring role had an impact on well-being. Carers didn't feel that they were being heard by health and care professionals, where to find the right information. And then the big one is about carers feeling like services don't talk to each other, so they can attend one place and get a different type of response and another place where they don't know how to help them. So we focused on this to make sure that that was part of the included in the strategy. This slide is just to say that we had obviously regional and national considerations. So regionally, there's a lot happening at the ICS level, the integrated care system level, and we can't miss that because there's a lot of resources in there for just ensuring that people in Calderdale know what's happening and are tapped into and using the resources. There's loads of stuff like Young Carer Support app, cookbooks, and very supportive with helping to roll out the primary care quality market. So that's a key one that we're tapping into. Nationally, also, there's, as you can see here, and it's in the strategy, we looked at some of the stuff that's going on with the long-term plan commitments and focusing on tapping into the resources that are attached to this national push to support carers better. So this kind of wanted to highlight this a bit more, and this came from feedback from the Integrated Care Board senior management team meeting where I presented some of this, and it's just to highlight the number of carers in Calderdale as per the 2011 census, and we're using the 2011 census because we don't have the results of the 2021 census as yet, and a number of health and care professionals that work in Calderdale, and that just shows it's about 62% of health and care workers as to the carers. So that shows how important carers are to Calderdale, how much work they're helping us to do. We also, just to show the demographic and what we are currently doing. So we have about 21,000 roughly carers who identified themselves in the 2011 census. And we have 3 main carer support groups. So we have the adult carer support group, the young carers, and then Unique Ways does support the parent carers. That just shows the divide of how many people are registered in these groups currently. And one of the objectives is to try to increase that number to get more people to register or be able to be helped in Calderdale. The graphs here just show the divide. So, carers it's a wide range of age groups with the carers, and the highest being the 26 to 49 age group, but there's quite a significant number that are also over 75. So we just need to look at the whole spectrum. So as part of the development, we've engaged a lot we've made sure to engage with a lot of people, a lot of professionals, a lot of organizations, definitely engaging with the carer support services that we currently have in place. We also have a carer strategy group, and that's where we're hoping this action plan will sit there and report into there in terms of the governance process. We've engaged with the anti-poverty program, Health Watch, the business and skills team, definitely with the regional colleagues, the mental health trust, local hospital, and carers, of course, sharing their experiences with us, which has been very helpful. And there were a number of key stakeholders at the workshop in June, which this slide shows quite nicely, just to say these are different range of stakeholders that were attended the workshop. I think there was about 50 people in the workshop at one point, and so that was really helpful to get all the feedback and all the insights we needed to make sure that this strategy worked across the board for everybody. So at the workshop, it was agreed that this should be the Calderdale vision for carers. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially we want it to be a partnership of healthcare and voluntary and community organizations to work with carers. So it has to be a partnership. We have to be able to work together, because as you can see from the action plan, there's quite a lot of actions and no one organization could do all that. So working together is very, very important. We also wanted to make sure that we highlighted we wanted to make sure carers feel recognized and valued as part of the health and care community. So they're a part of it. They're not just going to come in and out. They're part of decisions that should be made. And then we wanted to highlight the range of, I guess, issues that carers face. And so we wanted to tackle physical, mental, social, and financial needs so that carers can assume a caring role alongside a fulfilled life. So this was agreed at the workshop as the vision. And then we also agreed these 3 objectives at the workshop as well. So I'm just going to read them out. The partnership will work together to reduce, with carers to reduce inequalities. We want to support all aged unpaid carers physically, mentally, socially, and financially in their caring role. And then we definitely want to improve how information and advice is shared with carers. And we want to reach those that we do not currently reach, because there is a gap. So from these objectives that I've just read out, the action plan was produced, which we shared as part of the appendix. So it's a 5-year action plan. We have the timescales indicative, but it's not approved yet. So hopefully that will go to the strategy group, and then we will work together as partnership to agree those. Yes, as we said, a large number of actions, but we're hoping that as we're working together, it would make it, and across 5 years, it would be easier to work together to be able to fulfill those. So in terms of next steps, the document that was shared is not currently accessible in terms of being able to be used by those who are disabled. So I'm currently working on that to make it accessible, working with the team in the ICB to help me make that accessible. Once that's done, and then once we've agreed here that it could be signed off, we're hoping to publish the strategy on the Carers Partnership website early September, so this month, and then we will do a press release to share that information with the public so that they know when it's been published. So I think that's it for me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kate. And thank you for that brisk run through. But people had the documents in advance, and it was a good read.
I'm trying
could you take down your slide now so that the chair I can see?
So I was trying to stop sharing. I'm not. I don't know how to do that. Sorry.
Okay, while we're waiting for you to do that, I'll ask Robin to come in, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Kate. It's a really excellent piece of work. I just wanted to highlight on one of your slides, you had the numbers of employed and in this sector rather than the number of carers. Just a slight inaccuracy in that, which we need to be really clear about. I think what you've done there is include the whole employment of those organisations. Only a very small proportion of those are in Calderdale. So, for instance, you've got, I think, the whole integrated care board workforce. So I think you just need to maybe have another look at that.
Okay.
You've got all of the CHFT workforce, whereas obviously they work across in Greater Huddersfield. You've got all of the Swift workforce. The stark differential is much bigger than actually it looks, because the number of staff in Calderdale working in health and care is quite a bit smaller than your number. So just if you have another look at that, because I think it's really important to make that point, that when we think about health and care, and we tend to think NHS staff, maybe social care, maybe the community. It's the other way around. The biggest number of people delivering health and care on a day-to-day basis are in the community. Then it's local government. Then it's the NHS. It's the other way around in terms of scale. And I think that's a really important, just a conceptual thing to understand. Definitely. But I just want to make that point.
Thank you. I'll do that. I'll make sure I make that change.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a great strategy. Well done to the team. Well done to Kate and to Rona. A couple of points about the numbers, if there's 21,000 or so unpaid carers and we've got 2,000 registered with a local support agency, then that's, I don't know my mathematics, we've got about 10% registered. So there's a 90% gap, which doesn't feel right at all. And if we've got a great strategy, we need to make sure it's reaching everybody. So how are we going to do that is one question. And I don't think there's an easy answer, but you might have given it some thought, because it's not different from Calderdale anywhere else in the country. The other thing is that 59% are aged 26 to 65. Not all of them will be in work, but a lot of them will be. And you talk about an employers for carers accreditation scheme, which I've never heard of. We only have about 50 employees at my organisation, but across all these partners on this call now, there'll be a lot of people employed. And if we all sign up to trying to develop that accreditation scheme within our own organisations, that's a starting point. And then how we can make every employer, every responsible employer in Calderdale, hopefully support that scheme. That would be at least one thing we could try to develop quickly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Do you want to come back on that, Kate?
Yeah, so the Swift, sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, Swift have a very good scheme in terms of how they work as an employer to push their accreditation. So that's something that, as part of the action plan, we would focus on working with Swift to try and get their knowledge, the learning that they did, and try and spread that across. So it's a very key point you've made, and that's what we're trying to work on. In regards to the 10%, in terms of 10% being registered and the others not, that's one of the objectives, the third objective, which is that we try to reach those we currently do not reach. It's about, comms, like we're saying, it's about working together as a partnership. So if, like I said, the carer can turn up at one place, they need to be able to be signposted everywhere. The strategy is good in that we've got, primary care in there, all the organizations as part of the care, Calderdale Cares. So that's where we're trying to drive. If we go through and push and take this message to the organizations, wherever a carer turns up, they will be able to be supported or identified. So that's the aim, is to get that number up using those kinds of initiatives.
Thank you. And being a good employer covers many things.
Yes.
Absolutely right. I was concerned to see the statement about the 7-month wait for young carers to be assessed. That is particularly concerning. It's all concerning, but that was particularly concerning. And I'm glad that was highlighted within the paper. Ashley?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, excellent report. Thanks, Kate. Good stuff there. I wasn't sure about whether the question I'm going to ask was answered or not. Given what Robin said, quite rightly, that the majority of care is provided by non-professionals, I wondered what degree of training is possible, available, accessible to the spectrum of people of all ages who have to do care. And I wonder how important you would regard that as being. So the level of training, help in terms of dealing with the problems which relate, mental pressure problems, which are highlighted there, as well as just practical problems. And the other bit which stuck out to me was that there is an allowance for carers, but was it only 16% to actually claim for it? There may be a sort of pride issue there, or an awareness thing, I don't know. But surely we should be encouraging people to take an allowance for the massive work they take on. So those are my 2 comments. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with those. And I think the current carers wellbeing service, so that's the adult 18+, they support carers with helping to fill out the application form that you have to fill out to be able to get the allowance. They support them. So this is where we want to drive referrals or drive carers to that service so that they can get that support. So that's what I would say with that. And yeah, I agree with everything you've said.
Thank you. I think Rona and Kate, you're hearing from the board an endorsement and support for the strategy and need for the continuation of the work. Is there anything you want to add, Rona, at the end here?
I think it's been really useful feedback, and thank you for that endorsement. I think a lot of the comments that have been raised today are in the action plan, and that's the key bit, that this is a 5-year action plan, and it's very much dependent on having that partnership approach to drive this forward. But on a positive note as well, Kate is with us for a bit longer. So one of the things that Kate will do is start to implement the action plan to get the partners working together to start to move that forward. And I think that's a crucial thing, that we need to keep that consistency of Kate in there to help us to do that and drive it forward.
Thank you. Thank you both for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, can we move on then to item 10? Graham, I think this is where you come in. These items are for information, and it was important that the board had sight of this. I think perhaps we hadn't necessarily had sight of these Excel spreadsheets and the filled-in form, but you've given us sight of those papers. Is there anything you particularly want to add before we note the item?
Nothing really to add, Councillor Scullion, except that it's as part of our standard returns for the National Better Care Fund Board. We will be doing a new plan for this financial year, which is underway at the moment. So that will be coming to the board later, hopefully in the next board meeting. And that will again will be for information. So we're undertaking the new plan for this year, as we did last year, and I think you had sight of last year's plan. So yeah, just to give the board information that it is a standard return, and it's a template that we don't have any control over. So some of just to let you know that some of the text is hidden, and you have to actually click into the cell to get sight of the full commentary. So yeah, but that's out of our control, I'm afraid, because it's a template that we have a duty to complete. It's not something that we do internally.
Thank you for doing that, and thank you for bringing it forward for the board.
You're welcome.
To note. Any particular questions on this? No, thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Councillor Scullion.
Move on to item 11, the forward plan. Mike, is that you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just nothing to add to the forward plan, just to say that we do have an informal meeting of the board 2 weeks today with 2 items on the agenda, one about learning disabilities, and one which I think is an opportunity to pick up the point that Dr. Cleesby made earlier on about aligning the different strategies, because we've badged it as a joint meeting of the Calderdale Cares Partnership Board and Health and Wellbeing Strategy. But I think probably that item will focus on looking at the different strategies and how they fit together. So that there's that. I also wanted to say that after the last informal meeting of the board, which I'm looking a little bit at Robin about this, is that we agreed that as a principle, these meetings, the formal meetings, would remain remote, as we've had it this morning. But the informal meetings, which are more interactive and developmental, we will aim to be face to face. So that currently is the plan for 2 weeks today. So I just wanted to mention that as well. Thank you, Councillor Scullion.
Thank you. I think you're absolutely right. It's quite hard sometimes to spark ideas and take ideas and run with them online compared to meeting in person. Thank you for that. There is also, Mike, you may wish to help on this. There's any other business of annual report from Debs on the sustainability of the local voluntary and community sector. And I think in the October meeting on the agenda, we're going to have work on the cost of living in particular. I'm just wondering if those two things marry up. Some guidance, Debs?
Yeah, they do, Councillor Scullion. The item that we wanted to bring under any other business today, and Julie will help me with this, is just that Julie can explain some work that's been done within the sector in light of the cost of living crisis and the challenges and that the sector's facing. And then Julie will explain that in just a couple of minutes. And then I've got a suggestion as a way forward between now, what we do between now and the October meeting, Councillor Scullion.
Right, thank you. Over to you, Julie. Hello, Julie.
Hiya. I'll be brief. So we carried out a financial resilience survey across the BCSE sector in the back end of July, beginning of August, in response to some information that we're receiving about the sustainability of some of the groups. It was a really tight survey, 11 questions, went out to all of the organisations that held on the VSI Alliance database. We had 47 responses. Took quite a lot of chasing because it was the holiday period and we didn't give the sector any advance warning of this. But some quite stark results in terms of the information that we gathered back in terms of the resilience of particular groups. So there are a number of groups who are in danger of not continuing 3 months hence from now, but there's a bit more work that I'd like us to do. So I don't, Debs, if you want to come in here and we'll just explain what's next.
Please.
Thank you. If I may, Chair. So we, what we're proposing to do is a bit more work quickly but comprehensively as we can to look at some of those, and obviously. This is sort of commercially sensitive and sensitive information, but using the information that Julie's got from the survey to look at the sort of risk of some of these organisations or services folding, to be clear about what the impact of that might be on the healthcare and wellbeing of our communities, but also on healthcare and wellbeing services that are provided, so that partners are cited on the potential impacts. So what I'm proposing is that, and I think it's important that the Health and Wellbeing Board sort of agrees that this is something that we'll do and sort of, I guess, owns that potential piece of work. So we're proposing to get some colleagues together from the council and the NHS and obviously working with Julie and the team to do that little bit of analysis, a bit of a impact assessment, really, so that partners are cited on the potential implications, and then we can obviously have a conversation about that at a future meeting. I think the key challenge is the survey was done at a time when we hadn't quite appreciated that how costs of doing things were going to go up, and also how the need for the support from the voluntary and community sector was going to increase as well. So it may be that the situation is even more challenging. No, it's likely that the situation is even more challenging. So I just wanted to ask the board for endorsement, really, to do that piece of work, if that's okay, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to bring Robin in.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to sort of advise the board that we're doing that in the context that I know you'll understand. The scale of what we're facing is beyond anything that we've ever experienced in public services, and I think is clearly, in terms of this particular issue, posing a threat to voluntary community sector, but also businesses beyond the pandemic. So I think we need to start from that and be honest and clear about that. We clearly will need to understand what that will mean in practical terms over the next few weeks at a national level. And the local authority is looking to bring a report to Cabinet in October about the local authority response. The West Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority is also working on a West Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority response, working with each of the 5 places in the economic, transport and housing climate context that it's its remit, but also the business sector impact as well. And there is a paper to the West Yorkshire Integrated Care Board on Tuesday at the Partnership Board, which is a public meeting, which will set out the West Yorkshire Integrated Care Board's initial thinking at this point, mindful that there will be a lot more water under the bridge in September, and that's Tuesday afternoon. So I think we just need to set that context about this is something beyond the scale of any local intervention, because it's a scale of depth of impact that is beyond any of us to be able to mitigate in its entirety. Thank you. It needs a national response.
Thank you. I hope I can speak on behalf of the board then, given that context, in terms of the answer to can we have approval to go ahead and do more work? The answer from this board is yes, definitely. It's essential for us as councillors and for health professionals, housing professionals. There's no point in referring people in need to organisations that no longer exist because they no longer have the money, the people, they can't pay their own energy bills, and they're exhausted by the pandemic in terms of the reserves that they had. So I think I speak on behalf of the rest of the board, which basically says more power to your elbow. We really want to see the outcomes of that piece of work. Thank you. Okay, we've come to the end of the formal agenda and we're just within time. Thank you all for being quite so disciplined, and thank you for your contributions. And I look forward to see you again very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.